right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining on time. Those that did, anyone that's watching on video, hello, and welcome back. We are in week 3 of Coding Bootcamp here at Hired Labs. We're going to be doing our web development foundations. So we're going to go through a review a little different than we have before because this is somewhat of a milestone. Like the first couple of weeks, we covered some things, and now we're going to shift gears into using those things and building something. So let's just go over what we did in the first couple of weeks. One of the major concepts that we talked about is how we interact with computers, how they understand what we're doing, how we tell them we want them to do something. Really boils down to files in directories. The computer is reading our files very quickly, top to bottom, left to right, in those directories. We talked about Python syntax and running applications through our entry point, as you recall, that little piece of syntax that used the conditional control structure to look at if the name thing equals main, if we're calling our main.py directly. We're going to see that pattern more today as we go into what we're doing. And then we wrapped up last week talking about algorithms, both the ones that we write ourselves and the ones that have names that are used for things like sorting and search and specific functions, solving specific problems, solving our own problems with them, and the choices we make in doing so in the both algorithms, data structures, data types, and all those sorts of things. So normally I would ask if people have questions up to this point, and if people have been reviewing and practicing. And I do really want to entertain your questions on all of that stuff, but I want to make a point that we are shifting into building something and using these things now. So we're going to use this Python, we're going to use classes, we're going to use functions, we're going to put files in directories and start building our own application. So if you haven't been doing this in Python anywhere, today is a really good day to start doing that. So you should get set up on Python anywhere if you haven't already. And if you still have questions about the algorithm problem solving or any of those things as you're working through it, which I encourage you all to continue to do so as you have time, hit me up in Discord, on email. We can set up some time, we could talk through there about those, but we're not going to do any more class about those specific things. It's kind of like for your own exercise, and we're going to start building things moving on. So with that, let's dive into today's content. And as you have questions about that, we'll move forward. I sent out documentation, and we'll get into that for the hands-on part. We have a few concepts to go through quickly first as we talk about our content for today, which is day 5 overall of the course and backend frameworks. So before we go into using our backend framework and setting up the one we're going to be using called Django, we're going to just have a quick discussion and definition of what this is that we're talking about in the terms of web development. You'll often hear things called the stack, right? And that's really just the choices that have been made about the technologies used from what's called the back end to the front end. Let's define those things really quickly. So the back end of our web application and web development most of the time includes a space in your application where the programming languages that we saw on that scale between human languages and machine languages that were general programming languages, things like C and Python and JavaScript to a certain extent, even though it's wrapped in Node here. These things are back-end technology. So they're going to do things like the business logic, the while it loops, the if statements, and all those sorts of things, the functions. This is the stuff that your users, your end users, probably aren't going to interact with directly. It's the services, the stuff that makes your programs interesting. The other part that's really important here is that these things, I guess technically Node here is written in JavaScript. And what we have in addition to these languages, JavaScript, Python, and C, and things like that, we have what are called frameworks. So these are 2 examples of frameworks that are written in Python. We're going to be working with Django, this one over here on the left. But there's another one that's very popular, Flask. These are both, again, written in Python. But what they do is they give us specific tool sets for developing web applications. That's what frameworks do. So it's going to give us ways to interact with databases and run our HTTP routing of files and things like that to serve up our pages that we're going to be building. So all of this stuff is the back-end type stuff. And again, we'll be working with Django as the framework that gives us the tools to do that. And so this is in opposition to front-end things, which is going to be all the stuff that users interact with. It's another space in your application, where all the buttons and forms and all that sort of thing are. And you're going to have these 3 as your main technologies that you're going to interact with at a basic level in front-end technologies. There are also frameworks up there. We'll talk about those next week. But just to kind of introduce what these are, you have HTML, which is really a markup language. That's specifically the layout of your page, where things are, and how things are set up. The CSS is going to be your style sheets. So it's going to be the colors, fonts, all that sort of thing. And then JavaScript here is going to make things interesting, make things move around, make things dynamic. And this is really, again, you could do, as you can see on this chart, instead of using Python like we are, you could do Node, which is JavaScript, and just have a full application, front end and back end in JavaScript. But you have other choices. You can do other things, right? So this is generally what the delineation is. The front end is things where users are interacting. The back end is your other things where they are not. And you may also hear full stack. That's just all this stuff together. So that's just what we are doing in this course is full stack development, because we're going to do both back end and front end development grouped this way, working with, again, Python, Django, and then these 3 front end technologies. Any questions about this?
Will we be touching on all of these or just?
No, just the highlighted ones. This is just kind of an example of what the things are that exist. We're going to do all the front end technologies, all the front end languages. We'll be touching on all of those. But as far as the back end stuff, we're really just going to do the Python, the Django, and then databases. For the most part, but there's the C and JavaScript we're not going to do, or Flask. Right. Cool. So anybody know off the top of their head, without looking it up, I know everybody's got a screen in front of them already, but anybody know what HTTP stands for? We talk about HTTP interactions being a backend thing. What does it stand for?
Is a hypertext traffic protocol, and then there's unsecure and secured.
Yes, very close. So it's hypertext transfer protocol. And it's how hypertext, it'll get hung up on the hyper part, but it's just files and directories. It's how these are transferred from place to place. And yes, the S is if it's secure or not, right? So what keep in mind here is this is a system of rules to route requests from clients to servers and then responses from servers back to clients. And this is what we are doing, right? So this is a diagram of that. So we have our server side things over here on the left with files that could be pulled up by our web server, but it's all started on this right side, on the client side in the browser, right? So imagine a user on a browser like we are now, or like we do with Python Anywhere, and we send a request. That's anytime a user pokes anything, it's going to go back to our web server, get some files out of where we tell it to, and send it back, right? So this HTTP diagram, this is what we're coding. This is what we're going to be making and dealing with when we do our web framework in the back end. Does this all make sense to everyone? Anybody have any questions about this?
Makes sense.
Cool. I know this is fairly common knowledge at this point because it's just how the internet works. But keep this in mind as we're building these things, because we're going to be writing exactly this. We're going to be dealing with requests, dealing with responses as we go. So take a kind of high step back in conceptually what we're going to be doing when we design those interactions. And this isn't a design course, but I've mentioned this before, a few concepts that are useful as we build our application, right? And one of the things I mentioned last time was this concept from the book, The Timeless Way of Building, where we have a context in which a system of forces arise that are in conflict with each other. And it's our job to make a configuration that allows those forces to resolve themselves, right? So this is sort of what the author of that book claims is every building task is like this. It can be broken down to this. In terms of our web application, if we talk about our application as the context, and we take an example of like the systems of forces that might arise, you can have a user that wants to access their own stuff, right? And so a possible configuration, a pattern, as this guy likes to say, a pattern language, is a sign-in page, something that's normal that we all kind of know, that's a standard now. This sort of pattern is the thing that's going to be built in Django that we can use from Django to just plug into our overall design to solve this problem. So this is where our backend framework is going to fit in, is taking these patterns that resolve these sorts of things that are very common to use. And then the last thing about theory before we get hands-on and go through actually building something is this idea that I want to keep in mind as we go throughout is dividing a finite space, right? So we're going to be building something, but it's not like modularly adding things to the outside, even though we will use terms like modularity and we'll use modules and stuff like that. We still want to think of this as dividing a space that exists, right? So from that abridged or that condensed part of the Timeless Way of Building, if you read it, the number 19 is just talking about how space gets differentiated in every building act that you do, and that it's the fact that the whole thing is going to precede the parts, and it breaks up like an embryo. This guy was kind of a hippie from Berkeley, so he's talking about giving birth and things like that. We don't have to get that in touch with nature if we don't want to. This is still digital, but the point here is really that should conceptualize these things as an entirety, and we're going to break up that entirety and differentiate the space within it. And to kind of bring this analogy all the way around, if we think about what he was talking about with an office building, there's a plot of land, this little check, dash box. That would be everything outside of it is the city itself, the infrastructure that you plug into. Inside of this, we're going to put some things into it, like a parking lot. Again, we all know what a parking lot is. They can come in different patterns, but we give some space for it and just mark that off really fast. Same thing with a main building. We differentiate some space inside. This can be round or, 5 stories, 10 stories, doesn't matter. It's going to take up some space and it's going to be within our plot of land. And then within that building, it's going to have a lobby. There's going to be offices. There's going to be some things in the back end that, the business functions. Maybe people go to, maybe they don't. And then again, further within the lobby, it could be broken down with waiting areas, tellers, all sorts of different things, depending on what kind of business you have. So if we take this to our web application, that same plot of land, if we think about everything outside of this, this would be like the whole internet. And this plot of land is your website, your space on that. And we're going to set this up today. This is the first thing we're going to do today when we do our foundation is define our URL, so our address, our space on the web. That's like this outer area. And then we're going to start differentiating that space inside of it with things like storage and the main application we're going to have, the files. These are all files. These are all files and directories somewhere. And then within our application, we have our homepage and we'll have some back-end functions, right? So again, the front end, back end kind of distinction. The homepage side is the front end thing. That will then be broken down into different parts of the homepage with, top banners, the footers, and all those sorts of things when we get into our front end development. The idea here is it's very applicable to think about it in its whole. And as you design the thing you're going to make, break it down into the limited space that you have into smaller sub pieces. It's making sense conceptually? Cool. Any questions? Nope. All right, straightforward stuff. Let's go get into the actual hands-on work for today. And I'm going to pull up, let me get out of this. I'm going to pull up the documentation that I sent out earlier this afternoon. If anybody got a chance to walk through it already, that's cool. If you didn't, also don't worry about it. We're going to go over all of it now for the most part if we have time to. I'm not going to follow exactly in the same order. I might jump around a little bit. I'll kind of highlight that when I can, but let's do it either way. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where we are going, and then I'm going to scrap that and destroy it because it's something I want you all to be comfortable doing, show you it's possible, it's easy to do, and don't be afraid to do it at any point along the way as we're doing this. We will build towards something, but if you have to stop because you got totally lost, don't be afraid to throw it out from scratch and start over, and I can help you like get those files back and start over again. But so on our web tab, if you didn't start already, you may not have anything here. But if we go to this URL, it should be my application that so this is the application we're going to build. This is a simple web page. I want to build our to-do list. We demoed this before. We can add a task. We do some stuff through it. We're not going to go through each part of that now. What I'm going to do though, is I'm going to destroy this application and stop it entirely and build it up from scratch, right? So once we get to this point, once we started one of these, the way we get rid of this, and again, I don't want anybody to hesitate doing this as you're practicing. I'm going to go down here and say delete. And if you did this before, if you made the documentation up to now, you don't have to do this part. You can skip this part and just wait. Don't have to delete it and start over, but I'm showing this so that everyone knows you can, right? So I'm going to delete it. I'm going to throw it out and say I have no web applications. If I go back here, it's going to say, hey, there's nothing here, but you can do something with it, right? So we no longer have that, but something else we need to do. So I'm going to go back to a bash console. And we'll start doing the rest of the stuff we need to do here in Linux for now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to show you what's in our home directory. So we got our classes.py, we got our main.py, and then I have these two directories, my site and my VM. So to completely start over,
you zoom in on the bash console like that?
Oh, I held down control and then hit the plus sign, and then the minus sign will get smaller.
Cool.
Yep. All right. So then now I have these things and I have this my site and this virtual environment directory. We're going to build those. So again, if you're doing this on your own and you want to get rid of all these things, I'm just going to get rid of this stuff. So remember, use the R flag, the recursive flag to remove. I'm also going to use the force flag just to make sure that it goes away. I'm going to say my site. And the virtual end, it should take both of these and get rid of them. This might take a few seconds, and that's okay. The idea here, though, is that when you're building these things, we should be able to not worry about throwing them out and just starting completely over from scratch and having a point that you can get back to fairly simply within Linux. This might take us a minute. While we do that, did anybody get a chance actually to follow the documentation and try out building any of this? No. I know it was only just a few hours before class. I know everybody's got a lot of things going on.
I started messing around with it last week because I want to do a web page for the farm site.
Oh, cool.
But I'm still on the I registered my domain name and I was in here trying to figure out how to get the C name. So I haven't made much progress. That's what I'm trying to say.
that whole nightmare, man. Yeah, we're not gonna get to that level of getting your custom domain name in there. We're gonna go with the generic one. But yes, I feel you on the C name thing. Those changes can take like 2 days at a time. So even when you change a configuration, you don't know if it's right for a couple of days. But all right, so here now we've gotten rid of that. So now we have here. I can just clear this up to prove that we're on good starting ground. If I list what's in there, now I just have my classes and my main.py and again this PyCache. So we're gonna start it over from scratch. And let's build our web application together. So I'm gonna leave my console open, but I am gonna go back to that web tab. I'm gonna open a web tab in another tab, and let's start there. And we're gonna use Python Anywhere to get us going. So this piece of it is really a deployment, right? We're setting up our infrastructure. This is our connection to the internet. It's kind of that dashed line that we're talking about. We're gonna set up our plot of land there. To do that, we're gonna do add a new app. And it's going to tell us this little warning. This is kind of what, Greg, you were talking about. Our default is going to be our web app's domain name is going to be our username.pythonanywhere.com. Now, this is really important to keep track of because for us and for everything, if you look even just up here at the top of the screen, the URL, the uniform resource location is going to be in this format. We have the domain name and then /user/ whatever, just like a Linux directory. Right. So this right here, our user, our domain is going to be like the root directory for the application that we're building. Everything is assumed to start with this piece here. And we're going to plug in today where that goes. So this is just going to say, hey, on the free version, it's going to be your username.pythonanywhere.com. If you want to do something special, you need to upgrade and pay us for it. So we don't need to pay them for it. We'll use the generic one and just hit the next button. Right here, it says select a Python framework. This has Django built in. That is what we're going to use, but don't click that yet. We're going to do manual configuration. And the reason we do that is because if you click the Django button, it's going to do a lot of these things automatically for you. And I want to step through it manually so that you're not stuck doing this in Python Anywhere. You could take the things that we do today as manual steps and do them literally anywhere. You could do them on your own device to a certain extent. It'll be a little different if you do them on your own device, but you can set this up and deploy that anywhere, not just Python Anywhere. So manual configuration on this screen. Click that. It'll take us to the next choice, which is the Python version. We'll talk more about versions at the end of the course, but we've talked a little bit about it already when we talked about Python. The latest one they have here is 3.10. There's no reason not to use the latest one on this one, but these are available if you need some other version for some other project you're working on. So we'll do 3.10. And then the last thing is going to give us a little warning. It says, hey, manual configuration. You're going to have to handle this WSGI, or I like to say WSGI. I don't know if anybody says it out loud, configuration file. So we're going to do that, right? And it tells you where this is stored. Now, this var, this location, www, this is the standard place where it is stored on most file systems, where it's going to be expected on a server, right? We talk about that interaction we're looking at on HTTP. This is the location, the file location of a server where this file is expected to be. So again, not specific to Python Anywhere. This is just kind of a standard. The other thing is a virtual environment. We have to specify where we want our virtual environment to be. And I want to do that manually so that we can talk about what virtual environments are, what they do, why we use them, and how to interact with them. So we're done with that. Let's hit next. It should take maybe a few seconds. We'll think about it. And then it'll give us back to that screen where I was before. I'm just going to close this. And here's our URL now, right? So it's the whole thing just as a hyperlink. I'm going to open this in a new tab. And this will give us, if you're following along and doing this with me, you should have something that says hello world, much like our own hello world thing. I told you that was a standard, but it'll be at your custom URL, right? So we have HTTPS // then your username, pythonanywhere.com. That's the full thing. And here we are. So
how do you get it to show the HTTP
TPS. Mine doesn't say that.
Oh, if you just click up here in the, I know a lot of things they'll mask it automatically like that. I just click up in here like I'm going to change it or write in it and double click, and it shows
Oh,
it
there
for
it
me.
is.
Yeah, to come up. And it's
So
funny. So you go ahead.
sorry, if somebody's looking at your site and you're actively making changes to it, does that update like
I love it,
as they're looking at it?
man. That's a great question. So
You have
now
to
that we have this
refresh. I
set
kind of
up,
stalked you on week 1.
yeah, absolutely, man. Like this is totally something that is live. This is out there. So if you go to the site, you'll be able to see mine just like anybody else's. But as a real quick, I was going to go through this page, and one of those things I'll actually skip down to it now because it's very relevant to what you're saying. So at the web tab page, all the way down at the bottom, we're going to go through these settings that are on here and talk about how to configure all these things. But relevant to your question, I'm going to scroll all the way down above the delete thing and above the disable. If I scroll just a little bit, there's a security section. And in the security section, there are a couple of things that you can set to either enable or disable. They're default to disable. So the top one is this forcing an HTTPS certificate. I always enable that. There's no reason I can imagine not to do that. I mean, if you really want to do HTTP for whatever thing you're doing, go ahead and do that. Now, JT, to your question, so that's one security step that I definitely advise everyone do. The other thing that you can do that I'm not going to do just for simplicity, and I honestly, if somebody hacks this, I don't really care, but you can put on a password to your site. If you flip this little enable, then you can set a password. It's going to store here in plain text. So, username, whatever. And then you're going to set your password as whatever you want it to be. I don't know what it'll take, but you set your username, you set your password. It'll take something completely lame like that. So this can locate something secure. But now my site is password protected. So if I go here, the idea is, oh, wait. When you make changes here, this is also to your question. Every time you make a change on this side, so we're writing on the server side of things, right? So we think about that picture that we had. We have to hit this reload button whenever we change a configuration, because that's going to reload our code on the server. You saw that when I refresh my browser, nothing happened. So when I refresh my browser again, now that I've reloaded this server side code, hopefully it'll ask me for that username and password. So that's one way, JT, that you can optionally stop people from accessing your site. Don't save that. So that's an optional way for you to keep your site away from people while you're developing it, right? So that's one of the things that they have built into Python Anywhere. But again, I'm not gonna use that because I don't. That's just a pain for me to use every single time I log in. But it's entirely up to you. If you want to set that on yours, feel free to. I won't be upset. I guess.
No, I was just curious
Okay.
if
Yeah.
they would see changes as we're making it and confuse the crap out of them if they were actually.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And that's something you got to keep track of when you actually start using something you expect to have users on, is when you make changes and what changes you make and how you push them up to what's live and all that stuff. That's usually something you think about in a broader context. But yeah, good question. All right, cool. So now we have this hello world. We've set up our basic parts of our app. Let's go through the other configurations that we can set here. We're going to get very, very intimately connected with this page, but just a quick overview to show what's here. In the free version, this is going to run for 3 months. So every 3 months, you got to come in and press this button to reset that timer. It tells you what day it's going to die, but that's great because it's just there and it's for free. This gives you some info on traffic based on, whatever they got. This code section, where you have source code and working directory, we're going to set these paths to where our code is going to be. We haven't made our code yet, but this is going to be a very important place that if we skip that, it won't work. Here is that WSGI file, which I'm going to open now because we're going to go make some changes and do some stuff in that very shortly. But I'm just going to open that in a new tab. So here it is, the WSGI configuration file. And there's our Python version that told us that we have it, right? Virtual env, we have a path to that. We haven't built that yet. Down in our logs, right? So this is something I definitely want to highlight. There's 3 sets of logs here. You got access, error, and server logs. The error log is by far the most useful. As you're doing what you're doing, more often than not, whatever problem you have is going to be in your error log. And if you have debug set to true, which I'll show you where that setting is, and you have all these things that are set up for developers to see the maximum amount of information from your system when a bug is thrown, it's almost always going to show up here. It's going to be a link to this error log. So this is really going to be your friend as you're developing things. Then below that, we have static files, which we'll spend some time talking about. This is really just anything that are pictures, images, videos, some of those backend scripts that we were talking about that are not dynamic sorts of things are going to be static files. Handling them is kind of a pain, but it's a step that we have to go through. And then the security we already talked about. So that's the bottom of a security, and then delete your app if you want to delete it. All right, so from there, let's go take a quick look at our WSGI file, and we'll start making some of our changes in here. All right, so if I open this up already, so if we look at where this is where we expected it to be, there's /var/www, and then there's my full name of my WSGI file. It's the domain name, but separated by underscores, not dots. And then there's a whole bunch of comments. Remember, these are comments. This thing leading with a hashtag, any row or line leading with a hashtag is not going to be read by the interpreter. And we're going to use that here in a second. So we scroll down a little bit. There's some debugging tips and some good documentation links and stuff like that. We scroll down to line 13, where it says Hello World. This is our Hello World app right here that we're looking at. So when we go to our website, this is the code for it. And this, for anybody that knows it, is just HTML in this string right here. So we're going to do some more of that. And as you can see, these are the parts that we can see on the screen. So we can read this. It says Hello World right here, and this is the link and all that kind of stuff. We'll go through HTML later. If you go down, though, there's a definition that looks kind of familiar. And we have an if and else statement and some other things that are going on in here. That's all cool. What we're going to do with this is we're going to take all this code from row 19, line 19 down to this line 47. I'm going to highlight all of it. I'm going to hold down control. I'm going to hit slash and comment all this out because we're not going to use this. This is the pure, what they call pure WSGI app. We're doing a Django app, so we're not going to use that. So I scroll down just a little bit more. We have this thing about virtual environment. It says if you want to use a virtual environment, you set as path, which we will. We'll go back to that in a second. But I'm going to scroll down here where it says custom WSGI. This is if we wanted to point to one of our own. We keep going. We're on 74, Django. This is where we want to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the code from 60 or 76 down to 89. So these lines of code, I'm going to uncomment those. So now I should have, the first thing I have is an import OS statement, and the rest of this is our Python, our Django WSGI. So this is going to do some things for us when we get going, right? We're not going to dive really deep into this, but it is going to have some assumptions that I want to draw your attention to. So this is assuming your Django settings file, which we will make shortly, is at this location. So just keep an eye on this. We're going to be doing this now. So we have a /home/ my username /my site /settings. So it's redundantly inside there. And we'll talk about more why that is. But just keep in mind that there's going to be some redundancy in our naming. So if you ever understand, if I have a question as to why, ask. Sometimes it's on purpose. And the other thing we're going to be running a lot of is manage.py. So remember we did our main.py before. The main entry point is called manage.py in Django terms. And we're going to make one of those now, and we'll see it actually in action. But so those are things I wanted to highlight as comments. The rest of this, you can read the code if you like as you go. This is going to be, just in Python that we've already done. But we're not going to have to make any changes to this outside of uncommenting this code so that our Django application is ready to run.
How did you uncomment them all quickly?
So I select everything, and then I hit Control and /, and it'll either comment or uncomment an entire block. You can toggle between them.
Do with lines 19 to 47.
And then lines 19.
Yeah, you highlighted them and you said we're going to get rid of them.
Just going to comment them out for now if we can keep them. We can erase them if you like.
Oh, I already erased them.
Yeah, that's totally cool, man. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. We're not going to use it. We don't need any of that, right?
Gotcha.
This is, and if in the earlier step, if you had hit, instead of doing the manual configuration, if you did Django configuration, this file would just have this code block in it. There wouldn't be anything else at all. So you can literally erase everything out of here except this piece, and it'll work just fine. Because all these things that are commented out, the interpreter ignores. So it doesn't even see it. You could take all this stuff out. It won't break anything. So these ones are the most important. And again, I've adjusted which line it is now. It was originally on 76, I think. But it's where it says Django, and then it starts the import OS should be the non-commented. And the application definition right here is the last thing that should be uncommented. Cool. And then we're going to save that, right? We don't need to necessarily update just yet because we got some other things we're going to do. So there was a mention of a virtual environment up here. It says you're going to have to do that. There's some instructions. Let's go set up our virtual environment and get that rolling so that we can do what we need to do with that. We'll talk about what it is, why we use them, and how we use them. So I'm going to go back to my bash console for that. And this can be
real quick. I saved the WSGI.
Yeah.
And there's an X next to line 36 where it says path equals.
Uh-oh. So that one should be, if it's not commented out, make sure it is, or just erase it. Because if there's anything where it says path equals, is it like this right here in your custom WSGI?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be commented out. So just make sure it's commented out.
Oh, okay.
Cool. You good? Nice. All right. So back over in the bash console, we're going to set up our virtual environment. We're going to talk about what those are, why we use them. So in Python generally, this isn't just Django specifically, it's best practice to set up a virtual environment. And I'm going to show you why. So there's this thing called pip. It's a recursive name. It refers back to itself. And it means pip install and then this program, right? P is the other program. So this is the syntax of it. You do pip and then you install a package. So pip install package is what that stands for. And what it does is installs, again, packages. Packages are things written in Python that can be used by anybody, can be pulled into your environment and taken care of. So what I'm going to show you is what that means, a little bit of practice. So if I do pip list, just in my home thing, you'll see there's a huge list of stuff. And it goes alphabetically. All of these are packages. So each of these do something for us in Python. They're all written in Python. We could go find these files. They're files and directories someplace. Here's pip itself. But you see there's a whole ton of them, right? So what virtual environments are going to do is going to set up a space for just our project where we can put in explicitly only the project packages that we need, right?
So what's the difference between pip and import?
Great question. They interact with each other, and we're going to see that interaction today, right? So the packages that you have in your environment are things you can then import into your code, but you have to have the package in your environment. This is like the first place that the package needs to be for you to import it.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer your question? They're connected.
I think so.
Okay. And it's good because, again, that's a little ahead of where we're going to be using those things. We're going to be playing around with exactly that thing today on importing packages that we put into our environments. So we're starting with what the environments are, what packages are. So as I scroll up on this, you see on here that there are versions on the right-hand side, right? These are all versions. Let's get up to the top where it's labeled, right? So we got the package name on the left and then the version on the right, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a virtual environment to have a clean slate and start over putting in just the packages we're going to need for our project. I'm going to do that. I'm going to clear out my screen real quick. And to do this, we are going to do a simple command starting with Python 3. A lot of commands we're going to do are going to start with this. We need Python 3 space, and then a flag, so -m, and this is short for module. So it's a module in Python. So this is a program that's kind of accessible through Python. And it's VENV. It's short for virtual environment. So Python 3 space -m space VENV, and then any arbitrary name of a virtual environment that we want to use. So we can call it literally anything. I'm going to call it the same name as the package, just so that we get in the habit of activating it by calling it virtual, this VN thing. You can call it whatever you like. This is a variable name. So when I do this, it's going to take a little while. It's going to take a few seconds. It's going to start building up our virtual environment. Again, this is going to be nothing more than files in directories, just like everything, right? But what this is going to do is going to tell our computer, specifically the Python interpreter, to treat this environment, this space, as only being able to access certain packages. Right, so now it's done. It didn't give me any feedback that it did anything. So if I do ls, though, now I do have a VM directory. This is a directory. We could see what's in there. We do ls VM and see what's in there. Now, we're not going to do anything directly with this, but we will be calling some things down inside bin specifically. So that was made automatically. These directories, there's files inside of there. We're not going to worry about exactly what those files mean. But now we have our virtual environment. So we've made it. The next thing we have to do to use it is called activating it, right? So right now we're in the same place we were. If we look at our input, we have the UTC time, we got our tilde that says we're at home, and then we have our little dollar sign that says we have control. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the word source, all lowercase, and then the name of the virtual environment that you made. So in my case, VN. I'm using tab complete because it's a directory that exists. So the source, name of our virtual environment, then bin and activate. So we do bin, it's the directory, the bin directory, and then the word activate. And when I hit enter here, it's going to pop up with this little thing on the left-hand side with the name of my virtual environment in parentheses. And that's my flag to tell me I'm inside of my virtual environment.
So we have to run the activate every time we're trying to access this?
Yes. Okay. And then to leave it, so you know how to get out, is just deactivate. And now I'm out of it. We can tell because the little VM thing disappeared over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to hit up arrows to get my source VM bin activate back. Go back inside. I'm going to show you the difference here. So I'm going to do pip list. And remember, the last time I did this, it was a gigantic list of huge, all kinds of stuff. This time, it's going to be really short. I have just pip and this other thing called setup tools. That's it. So now we have a blank slate to get started with. And I want to make really clear that this directory exists in our home directory. But we can be in our environment and I can move around into different directories. I can go down to my root directory and I'm still in my virtual environment. All right, so everything is files and directories, but I don't want you to conflate the working directory that you are in, right? When I change directories, I change my working directory to my root instead of my home one, right? I'm still in my virtual environment. So the packages, if I do pip list here, is still going to be just those two. Here, my screen's getting a little jumbled. Let's do this. So even though I'm in a different directory, I'm not in my home directory, I still only have these packages. Am I tracking that? Cool. So I'm going to go back to my home directory. All right, so now we are in our Python, or our virtual environment that we built through Python. And what we're going to do is we're going to install the things that we need. So pip install, and then the package name. So again, that's the name of pip itself. It stands for pip install package. And that's the syntax of the general command that we use. Pip space install space, and then the name of the package you want to use. So the first package we're going to install, and if you're following the documentation, this is one of the places where I'm going to split from it. I'm doing this on purpose, so don't worry about it. But we're going to do capital G-A-N-G-O for Django. This is one that's, most of the time they're lowercase. This one happens to be capitalized. You can do multiple packages with one install command. So if you have several packages you want to do, you can just write them with spaces, no commas or anything like that. Just the next one, you would put it here. I'm just going to do Django for now. So I'm going to pip install Django inside of my virtual environment, right? I make sure I've activated my virtual environment, and I'm going to install Django in here. This might take a little bit. While we do that, then we can go into our web app. While that goes, this is going to run for just a few minutes. If you're doing this yourself, this will also run for a few minutes. I'm going to go back to my web app tab in my settings. And I'm going to scroll down to this virtual env. Since now we've made our virtual environment, we can enter a path here to tell it where that is. Right. So if you recall, we just made it in our home /username up here where it says working directory that's listed. So I'm just going to copy it from there. And then I'm going to paste it down in here and then put the name of my virtual environment afterwards. So this entry in virtual env is going to be /home /your username /name of your virtual environment. And then another trailing slash at the end of it for good measure. And then you save it. So again, this would be /home /username /name of virtual environment, in my case, VN, to remind us that that is the name of the package we use to create it. And then see if All right, cool. So now Django is installed, and we know that for sure because it's successfully installed Django, and it says which version, and then it says some other things that it installed. So let's clear this up and let's have a look. So we do pip list, and now we can see we have Django, and we have a whole bunch of other things. We got like 6 things in here now. We only had 2 before. We had pip and setup tools. Now we got Django, we got ASCII ref, we got SQL parse and typing extensions. This is an example of why we do virtual environments, because out of that huge list of things that were just in our general space here on our Linux instance, we may have had different versions of SQL parse or typing extensions or whatever the case may be. We may want to use a different version of Django in a particular project. Those versions would conflict with each other and collide if they were just all in the same environment. So this environment gives us a partitioned off, like, separate space to put just our project's packages. Does it make sense?
And each of those items is called a package.
Yes, each of these items is called a package. And the reason there are several of them is because Django depends on other packages. So it has what's called dependencies. And this is something that you have to keep in mind as your project gets bigger, the dependencies you use, what these packages are, how they're updated, all that kind of stuff. It's like, again, each one of these, somebody is out there writing and maintaining and doing and keeping going. So the more of these you use, the more dependent you are on them. But yes, each one of these is a package.
So what is a package exactly? Is it
That is a really good
file?
question. Yeah, so it's a group of things. It's usually a specific function, right? So, like, for example, CSV is a package, and it has a whole bunch of things written in Python on how to deal with CSV files, like how to open them, how to write to them, how to read them, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's a package. It's like a specific set of tools that you're going to use for specific things. Like, so sometimes if you want to do visualizations, there are visualization packages out there that you might want to download and use. Like Seaborn is one that's real popular and that kind of thing. So it is code. It's Python code written somewhere, but it's packaged up into some sort of functionality that you can use. And we're gonna show that here in a minute. We're gonna use some of that functionality in the app that we're building. But does that kind of answer your question?
Sort of.
Sort of. Okay. It might be a little more concrete as we use it, right? So I mentioned that Django is the framework we're going to use. That's a package. You see right here, we installed it, right? So that is an example of a package. It's got like login pages. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. So let's start doing what it does, right? Now that we have Django in our environment, let's use Django and show you what a package does. This will help, right? So let's start a project. Now that we have our Django in our environment, the first thing we're going to do is start a project. So we're going to start again with Python 3-m. We'll say which module. And now that we have Django, we can use Django, this time lowercase. So Python 3- or space -m space Django lowercase. And then we're going to say start project, all one word, all lowercase. And then we will give it the name of a project. So I suggest that we all name it my site. That's what's already in our WSGI file. That's what we're doing by the default. It will be what we call things as we go forward. I really recommend that's what you do. This is arbitrary, though. You can't name it anything. But for our class, I really, 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 really highly recommend my site, or else it'll make debugging tricky later. So this is the beginning of a project. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to do some stuff and really anticlimactically just look at me and say, okay, cool, we're done with that. Now, if I list the contents of our directory, we have back our my site directory, which, that's all fine and great. Let's change directories into my site and have a look what's in there.
I got an error already.
What's that?
I got an error. It says
Oh, what error did you get?
Permission denied / my site.
Permission denied. Wait, which one did you call? Which one did you get an error on?
Just that last command, Python 3-m Django start project my site.
Okay. Did you put a slash after it, or did you just put my site with no slash?
No, just how you typed it.
And it's all in no spaces. Python 3, no spaces.
Python 3,
then space
-m. Right. Django lowercase, start project lowercase, my site lowercase.
And it gave you an error, huh? Sounds like a spelling error. Unless, did you hit manual configuration? Did you hit the Django configuration earlier when you set up your app? So do you already have a my site directory is kind of what I'm asking.
How would I know?
If you just do ls, do you see a my site directory listed? No?
No, I have like 12 or 15 different directories. My site's not one of them.
Okay. Okay.
Would being in or out of the virtual environment make a difference for that?
It would. Django, I think it would give you a different error, but this virtual environment definitely has to be activated. Do you have this little flag over there that says that you have your activated virtual environment?
Yeah, I have that.
Okay. So it's got to
But
be something
because
in the way, it's got to be in the way you
you
type this command. Because if you have
you had
Django,
us go
go ahead.
you had us go into the home directory. And
Yeah.
I never went back into my user name directory. Is that
Oh,
why?
maybe. That could be it. Yeah, you don't have permission to make stuff in some other directory, like in the root, like if you're in the root directory or something like that.
Yeah, you showed us how to do that, and then I just stayed there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so just hit CD and it'll take you right back to with nothing. Just hit CD all by itself and it'll take you right back to
Okay.
your home.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Cool.
And
And
then
then
I got to put the
then
command
run
in
that
again.
Python command. See if that works.
There we go. Okay, that was it.
Nice. All right. So then now that we got this my site directory, so let's change directories into it. So now we're going to be in our my site top level directory as it's called. So this is going to be kind of our root project directory. And if we now list what's in here, we're going to have a manage.py and we're going to also have another my site directory. So this is where it's somewhat confusing. This is the first time we're going to have our two things. So I'm going to go into the inner level of my site directory and kind of show you what's in here. So once again, let me clear up my screen real quick. Screen. All right, there's going to be a bunch of different files. So we're going to have a double underscore init.py. This is one of the things that Python uses for its modularity. So that this is a module. This my site is a module. Don't worry about that. We're not going to do anything directly with it, but you'll see it a lot. You may end up using them at some point. Generally, that's all it is. It's just a file by itself that we don't touch. We're not going to do anything with this. This is for asynchronous type stuff. Here's another WSGI file. We could use this and point to it if we wanted to, but we'll just use the one we got on Python anywhere. Our settings.py is where we're going to be today doing some things. We're going to do a lot of configuration, and that's a very important file. And then our urls.py is also something we're going to get into tomorrow when we start routing our actual different screens that we're going to be looking at, our different pages. But for right now, we're going to update our settings. And what I want to do is this is where it's going to kind of depart from the documentation, because in there, if you follow along or if you're looking at it now, we go through setting up an environment variable file and setting up environment variables. That is a best practice. I absolutely encourage everyone to do that, and we will get to that today. We're going to skip that part now and show you the very last like required piece to make all this stuff work, and we'll come back to that as we have time. The setting it up, because it is technically optional, but it's absolutely a best practice. And I'll show you why that is the case as we go, but we'll get to it as we get to it. So right now we're going to go to our settings.py file either way and do some updates there. Right. So let's go for ease. So we're not using our V for this part. Let's go to do this in the GUI. I'll just open that up in a new tab. So files. And then we're going to go down to our my site directory. And our inner my site, and it's going to show us the layout. So we got that init.py. Here's our settings.py. We're just going to open this bad boy up in our code editor so we can earn our text editor so we can do some things with it. There's a lot going on here, and we will spend some time doing a number of things in this. We're not going to go through every piece of it, but for right now, I'm going to scroll down to row 28, this allowed hosts, and it's all caps, which means that it's, a constant, but Python doesn't have constants. It's a variable like anything else. It's just for humans to understand that this isn't supposed to change throughout our program. And it has an empty list. There's nothing in this list, right? So what we need to add here is our domain name for our website, or else it's not going to work. And who recalls our domain name is or how we find it?
Would it be
Username
that?
.pythonanywhere.com.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. And on your web tab, if you don't recall, It's up there as a hyperlink, so you can just copy it from there. If you have your site open still, then it'll be written up there. Everything after the two backslashes after the HTTPS. All right, so we're going to take that and we're going to put it inside a string in our allowed hosts. Right, so it's got to be in quotation marks. So just copy that, paste it in there. So you got username.pythonanywhere.com in your allowed hosts. Save this. And then I will go back to our web app settings. There's a couple more configurations in here to make this all work the way we want it to hit the minimum checkpoint for the day before we go back and do the best practice on security. We're going to have to update where our source code and our working directories are. It's going to be the same directory, but this is important that we tell the computer where it is, right? So I'm going to copy this home directory again, except I'm also going to include my site at the end of it. So I clicked into the working directory where it defaulted to the /home/username, and I added /my site/, and then I copy that whole thing, and I'm just going to paste it into source code as well. So both my source code and my working directory have the same path to them in the web tab of Python Anywhere on the code section. All right, so we've made a couple of changes here. They're both visible right now. We got the code section where we put our paths to our top level directory, both as a working directory and where our source code is. And then we also add our virtual environment path to our virtual environment. All right, so now we made these changes. We made a couple of changes. We made a change to our settings file, which if you forgot to save, make sure you save this before we move on. So the first thing I do is make sure you save this. We added our URL in here. And then we made some updates on here. So we need to reload on our server-side code, push those changes to the server. That'll take a couple of seconds. And then when we go back to our site, here where it's open, we haven't refreshed the browser yet. When I refresh, it should change from that WSGI file, hello world thing to this Django rocket flying that says the installation works successfully. Congratulations. This is the point that I wanted to get everybody to today. At a minimum is the checkpoint for today. So who was able to get here? I see JT doing a little happy dance. I'm guessing that. Nathan's got a thumbs up.
Yes, sir.
Missed what you did in the bash console.
Okay. Okay. On this part, I just kind of navigated around and looked at things. I didn't really do much, actually. I think I was just listing things outside of making the project.
I'm sorry, that file, the settings, my site/settings.
Oh, settings.py? Yeah, all I
Yeah,
did was,
there,
yeah, I just added the domain name as a string into the allowed hosts list. So your
928.
username. Yep.
Huh. Did you type in allowed host? You typed in that whole line?
No, allowed host is already in there. It should be right around the same line for you too, because it's all default. I haven't changed anything else on it yet.
Why don't I have that?
Are you in the my site in the same directory? We got home username, my site settings.
Thought I was. Let me go back to files.
Okay. Yeah, and there's two levels of my site, right? So this is the inner one. There's my site and then another my site.
There it is. Okay.
Cool. Got it?
Clicked on the wrong one. And you just typed in the domain name?
Yeah, so it's just as a string in here. So inside quotation marks, you do your username dot, yeah, pythonanywhere.com.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. All right.
So question, for your virtual environment, you can pretty much name that anything you would like, as long as you continue to keep that same case. So for
Yep.
example, like instead of going virtual environment or VENV, I did sphere.
Yep.
That's perfect normal.
Totally fine. Totally fine. And that's typically the case. Like this, I kind of use for demonstrative purposes so that when we go through every day and we activate it, we'll be using the name of the module that you use to do it. But when you're really using these things, you're probably going to do something more related to the project for which you're using it, because you'll have several virtual environments that you're using, right? And you'll have different packages in each. And if you're not going to name each one of them VM, that won't be helpful for you. So, well, I mean, it might be. That might be what you decide to use. But yes, it is arbitrary. It's a variable name, just like anything else. So it follows whatever naming convention you want to follow, to answer your question. All right. So, one thing I want to do actually real quick, if everyone got to that point, I know I wanted to go through the other steps of setting up environment variables and using a .env file, because that's also a very, very, very common thing to do. And it's a best practice by far. I wanted to jump in to just have a look at a file that's in here. So I'm up at the top level, my site directory, shows print working directory to show you. I'm at /home/username/my site, right? So that's the project root, as I'm going to refer to it a lot of times. Top level project root directory. And in this directory, we have the manage.py file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print that out here to the screen using cat, because we don't want to mess around with and change our manage.py file. We don't do changes to it. Whoa, that's huge. See if we can get it down to a screen we can actually look at, right? Because we don't need to go line by line. I just want to kind of get the sense of everything that's on here. Let's clear this up now that we have a smaller size. Let's do it again. Okay. So what I really want to just show is kind of the structure of this being the application entry point that we've already done, and it follows the convention that we used. So we have a couple of import statements up here. We do import OS and import sys, which those are very useful things that we can do. Then we have a def main with nothing in it. And there's a whole bunch of logic and stuff in here. We have a try and except block. This is another way of doing conditional logic. We didn't go over it. It's good to know, but again, something you kind of just read and understand what's happening. We can go into these little bits and pieces as you go. But here's that same double underscore name main entry point thing. And if you recall, I said that while we were doing ours, I did a lot of the actual logic underneath this to hammer home that that's where it was. But typically you'll see this just as the main function call, and then all the logic goes inside the function. Here's an example of exactly that. Right. So this is this Django that we're using, that we're setting up. This is like YouTube uses this, and Instagram uses this, and this is used by real things. And it's the exact same application structure that we used already. And there's nothing more to this right here. It's just referencing other files and other directories, and other locations. Cool. So I encourage you to look around and read those things that come standard with Django all the way around. It's really useful, and we'll kind of get opportunity to do it. Any questions about any of that before we dive into the last little bit and set up the environment variables in a separate file? No? All right.
I don't feel like I'm smart enough to ask any questions yet.
Yeah, good. Just stay quiet. No, I'm joking. Yeah, if you don't even know what question to ask, that's definitely a mood. I know the feeling. But, again, it's just start spitballing. Is there something that you don't quite have a handle on that you think we might go over again? Or are you completely lost? Were you able to get to that point? I saw you doing the happy dance.
I was able to get to that point.
All right.
I just don't understand it well enough.
Okay. Yeah, no, it does take practice. That's the other reason I showed you the throwing it out entirely, and just, go through that a couple of times. Just go through the steps that we did today. Just like do them a couple of times, right? Start a project, give it a name, navigate through it, change the settings, do those kinds of things, and then do what we're about to do here. And just the more you practice, the better you'll get at it.
Yeah, I'll probably just redo everything tomorrow morning when my brain's actually working.
Absolutely.
Hey, could you go back to on your page to the virtual? So I believe it's on your web app setup, like your virtual.
Sure.
I just wanted to see what that looks like. Because I named things differently.
Sure.
I'm regretting every choice I've made.
Yep. That will happen. And that will happen. That's what I mean. Is consistent naming. It's an ongoing battle.
I don't know why I did it. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right. So let's talk about how we obscure sensitive information using an environment file, a .env file, and environment variables. So the first thing that we're going to use as an example of sensitive information is this secret key that is on line 23 for me. Now this, it says at the very beginning of it, Django insecure. So again, it's probably not a good key to actually use in production or anything like that. But this is the kind of thing that you don't want to have available to everybody in your code. But this settings.py file is a file that you're going to share places and save places that are publicly accessible. So what we have to do is hide this information somehow. What we're going to do that is we're going to move this information out into a separate file called a .env file that's going to be in the same folder, the same directory as the settings.py. It's going to be alongside of it. And we're going to reference it and save all of our stuff in there, but it will not be saved anywhere but in our environment on our local machine. It won't go up into any cloud storages or any other places that we push this code. When we talk about that towards the end of the course, in version control systems, it will be ignored by version control systems, the .env file. So we're going to set that up to keep these things secure. That's why we're doing what we're about to do. So let's start by making the changes to our settings.py file that we're going to make, and then we'll go and set up the .env file because that's a very simple file, and it just takes a second. Most of the changes are here. So I'm going to scroll up to our import statements right here on line 13, and I'm going to add an import statement of my own, right? So I'm going to do from environ, E-N-V-I-R-O-N, all lowercase. I'm going to import a class that's capital E-N-V. And we're going to see a lot of redundancy here where we use the three letters ENV for environment a lot. Sometimes they're referencing different things. I'm about to use it in rapid succession like 4 times. If you've got questions on why we do it or which ones are required and which ones are optional, shout them out. A lot of this is by convention, though, that we're doing, right? So the first part we've added is line 14, from environ, import, capital ENV, because it's a class. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit because the work we're going to do is actually around this secret key. So I'm just going to start doing that code down there. I'm going to give myself some space. So I'm on line 24. It doesn't matter what line you're on. I'm just shouting it out so you know where I'm at. You could be on any line as long as you're above this secret key call. That's the important part because remember the sequential control structure is going to read top to bottom. We're going to do some stuff that we need to be above this secret key. So anywhere above your secret key definition, we're going to start doing some things. The first thing we're going to do is what we've done before with classes where we instantiate our class. So we're going to do env, lowercase, as a variable name. Could be anything, but by convention, this is what we call it. So lowercase env, we're going to set that to an instance of our capital env, open parentheses, close parentheses, class. So an instance of our class. Now that we have our class, just like we did with our own custom classes when we made the car class and we did dot notation for the methods that are built into it, this env class has a method built into it which will read a file from our file structure that we'll expect to have environment variables inside of that file. So what we're going to do is do env dot to access that method, and then read underscore env. And open parentheses, I'm going to go ahead and close these parentheses so I don't forget. And then inside of this, it will expect a keyword argument called env underscore file. So keyword arguments come with some sort of setting, right? And we're going to do this as a string and give it a file path. And that path is going to be my site /.env. Now this is relative to the top level root directory, project root, which as you call is /home/username/mysite. That's all the stuff that we imagine is coming before this right here where we do our mysite/env. So now we're talking about it being in this inner mysite directory and being a file called .env. All right, everybody with me so far? Cool. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this string the secret key is set to. I'm going to take it out. So I'm going to hit Control X because I'm just going to take it and use it somewhere else because, again, I don't care if this is really secure. This isn't an actual production thing we're doing. I'll use the same key again. But we're just going to need a long random string later, so you don't have to save this one if you don't want to. I'm just going to hit Control X and cut it out. I'm going to replace it with the environment secret key that we grabbed from this file in line 25. So to do that, we're going to use our env variable that we know is an instance of our env class. And we're going to pass to it a string, sorry. So all caps, it's going to be Django underscore secret underscore key. Then I'm going to close the parentheses. So as a string, all uppercase, Django underscore secret underscore key. This could, again, this is arbitrary. This could be anything you want. It should be descriptive to keep track of it, but this is a variable name. So environment variable names by convention are all capitalized. These are things that you can set in your bash console, in your environment that way. There's all kinds of different ways of getting environment variables into it. This way of having a separate file and reading it in the way that we just did is really standard. So this is a way to do it, right? And Django secret key is recommended to have Django in front of it. You might have other secret keys for other things, even though it's called secret key here. So this is the last change we got to make here. So I'm going to save this. Now all I got to do is add that value and make this secret key variable in our .env file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here, just my site. I'm just going to do this in the GUI because it's very simple. And so now I'm in /home/username /my site. So the inner my site directory next to our settings.py file. So the same directory as that. Here it says files. I'm going to make a .env file. Whoop. Stop shouting. Sorry. .env, lowercase. And you want it to be a .dot file because it's a hidden file. So .env. I'm going to hit new file. It'll take us in there. And on line 1, I'm just going to do all caps, the Django secret key. No quotation marks, no nothing. Just plain write it in there. No spaces. This is one of those places where space might mess you up, where Python doesn't care. There's a plain text file. So no spaces, which is an equal sign. So it can set to. And then I'm just going to paste in that same key that I had before, even though it's not secure. Again, we're not making a highly secure app. I'm not worried about it. But if you want to make a secure thing, you should go get yourself a better hash than this, and this is where you would keep it. So we're going to hit save.
Yes.
Okay.
When I went to, I can't find my env file that we just made.
Uh-oh. So when you go to your directory here and you type in .env right there, it should take you directly to it in the thing we hit new file.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is not where I'm supposed to be, but okay.
Uh-oh.
I think I remember what I did wrong. Again, this goes back to my naming convention. I named it one thing, but then you were saying one thing, so I did what you said, not what I did. So totally something I just should have paid attention to.
All right.
Well, Nathan, if we look at your wall, we can already see you're an overachiever. So
I'm a bit of a slacker, actually. Tend not to be this hypercritical.
So
What's that?
The secret key not supposed to be green in the environment file? Like when I pasted it?
Oh, mine isn't because it's just a plain text
Okay.
file. So mine just looks all black and white.
All right, so it's...
And you named your file .env?
Yes.
So it's not expecting it to be Python or anything?
It just says .env.
All right. Well, let's give it a shot. See what happens. Maybe it's just your interpreter or your text editor to give me some static. So
no, I'm saying I have it. It's black. I was just wondering because usually the strings are green.
Usually it's green. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, in the text file it's supposed to be black. Yeah. No, good. You're good if it looks like this. Okay. I thought you're seeing green on this one. I was mystified as to why. Okay. All right. So then the last thing we got to do now, we made some changes and we've updated some things. Is we need to reload our server-side codes. This little recycle button thing up here on the top. If you press that, that's what it's going to do. So anywhere when we have a file open or text editor, we don't have to navigate all the way back to our web tab to update. So since this was ultimately a refactoring, and all we did was move this secret key reference into a separate file and then reference that file in our settings.py file, it shouldn't have any effect. It should function exactly the same way when I refresh on this side. So when I go back to here, it should still look like this when I hit refresh. Womp womp. But it didn't. Did everybody else's break like this too?
Yes, sir.
Nice. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie. This one I planned. Not every time I run into a bug in this course is going to be planned, but I want to make sure we had one in the beginning to use to show debugging as it goes. I actually already kind of called out where I went wrong on this. Anybody who was really paying attention and really on the ball, remember what I said earlier in the class when we first started this application, that I wasn't following something specific and it might break things. before I even start digging how we bucket.
Wasn't the way that you called the Django pip command?
It was at that time, yeah. Yeah.
But that's all I remember from that.
Okay. Okay. That's really good. That's really good. Okay. So let's go through how you debug this,
lowercase?
right? What's that?
Because you did lowercase.
No, it wasn't lowercase. But that's,
Hmm.
I mean, you got this right there in that spot. Yeah. So we're gonna get to exactly what it was. So
You're
we
going
have
to
this
the
page
error
here.
log.
Yep, we're gonna go to the error log. So in this page, we have this pop up because, and I want to show this real quick, because in our settings.py file, we have this debug setting on line 29 for me. It's on line 29 now, set to true. So it'll spit out good amounts of information to us because we have that set to true. If we had it set to false, this would just say like 505 or 404 or something. You wouldn't get to see anything. So that's why this is there. Out of this, you can get to our error log directly. It's like the top link when it says debugging tips right here. It says error log is what we want to look to. That's also available in our web tab. So you go to our error log, it looks a lot like this. It's black and white. This is not something that updates live. So if you do something and go back and make changes, you have to refresh this. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom because that's probably where our last call is going to be listed. And we're going to go over how to read this. So this is called a stack trace, and it goes back through, again, the stack. We talked about our data structures, the stack being things that functions are called in. So it just kind of stacks them up until it runs out of memory. And what it does is goes through each file and it says, okay, this file right here, a full path to it, on this line, something went wrong. So from environ import env. So something went wrong here. And then it goes back up all the way up through all these other files to the original call that kicked the whole thing off right here, where it says error running WSGI application. And it says module not found error, no module named environ. And then it starts going through a whole stack about which files it called it in. So here's our WSGI application file where it started, and it went all the way down to here when it broke. So this is where it broke. Anybody remember where we wrote this? The from environ import env. Where did we write that?
That was in the settings, wasn't it?
Yep.
The security.
It's in settings.py.
Settings.py. Here it is. Right. So there's that. And that's right. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm gonna tell you that. That's not the problem. Problem is it is in here. That's just where it broke. Right. So this is the line that it read when it just stopped working. It's like, wait, that's not cool. This is the error, though. Module not found error. What is this telling us? Coupled with what Josh Rice and Daniel mentioned, what is this telling us?
Environ package.
Exactly. So back to your question, JT, when we were installing packages with pip, I skipped that package somewhat purposefully so this would break at this point, right? So when we installed Django back in our Python, our bash interpreter, and we installed it, we don't have, whoa, I'm still yelling again. So here we got pip, pip list, see what's in there. We're not going to have any environment setting, no environment. So we had to install that. So to solve this problem, we do pip, install, and this we could be in any directory, doesn't matter as long as we are in our virtual environment and have it activated. We're good. So we're going to install and we're going to do Django lowercase dash environs, a specially tuned version of this general environment package for Django. So pip space install space Django dash environ, all lowercase. This shouldn't take long to install. Got a little successful thing. I got 0.11.2. And now that we have that, we shouldn't have to do anything else. But I'm just going to go ahead and reload the server-side code just because it's a good habit. And honestly, never hurts anytime you make a change to make sure that you have that updated. And then when I go back to our site, it should, when we refresh the browser, take us back to our Django thing launching now that we have that package installed.
Witchcraft.
It's exactly what it is. I'm seeing mixed looks, some frustration, some happiness. We get back to there. Some people still stuck.
Yeah, still stuck.
Oh no. Okay.
It says please try again later.
Please try again later.
Does still have like the frowny face and everything?
Yeah.
Does
Something went wrong. Frowny face.
Did you
wrong with trying to load this website? Please try again later. If it is your site, you should check your logs to determine what the problem is.
Yep. That's the log.
Did
Anybody
you
else get us
do
back
the
to this
reload?
point?
Mine just says something went wrong with a frowny face.
Okay.
But it's been saying that since that step where we put the domain name in the allow
Okay.
in the I think the settings.
Okay. Right here. If you want, and that's the other
Yeah,
thing, if you
there's
want,
something
because I can
before that.
access anybody's files from here. So you want, we got 15 minutes left in class. And this is absolutely the point that we needed to get to, right? So what we could do is we could debug some folks' specific things. Like Daniel, if you want, we could use yours. I could look at your files and have a look if you don't mind sharing with the class.
Sure. How do I do that?
No, so I could do it on my side. If you've already set me as,
Oh,
did you
okay.
set me as your instructor at the beginning of class?
Oh yeah, at the beginning of the course, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So which
Yeah,
username is you?
DMM.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So now I can enter your consoles and I can see your stuff. I'm going to go ahead and close all mine so we know we're in the same place. And this is really useful stuff because this could be valuable for everybody else, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to your web tab. And I'm going to try just opening your site and see what it tells me. It's going to say something wrong, but it's not going to give me the error log access here directly because I'm not you. There's some level of security on this. So I'm just go back to your web tab. Go to your error logs. All right. So, absolutely. So check this out. You're getting an error that says that the WSGI application isn't running, and you're still getting the path is not defined error, right? So this is telling me that it's probably all the way back in your WSGI file right here. This part. If you don't mind, I'm going to make this change for you. You cool with that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm just what file is that? Did I
This is
ever
the
go into that
WSGI.
file?
Yeah. So this is where we first started out on your back on your web tab. If you look down to code, the code section,
Yeah.
I'm kind of zoomed in, so it might look a little weird. Let me go back to somewhat closer to 100%. All right, so you scroll down to the code section where we put in our source code and working directory. Underneath that is the WSGI configuration file. And there's a link directly to it.
Okay.
And so I'm going to open this in a new tab. And this is where you're getting those errors before about path not being defined. And that's literally, we just don't need this stuff. So we could just erase this if you don't mind. If you're cool with that, I'm just going to erase it and save it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Cool. So we'll take that out, and then I'm going to save this and reload it. And again, the only pieces we need are the parts that are under the Django section. So the import OS down to the application, the get WSGI application file. And now you got it. You got that running on your end too?
Let's see. Do I need to reload and then click on the link?
You shouldn't, because I just reloaded your server side. So it should be the most updated code if you just refresh your browser.
It is. Got the rocket ship.
Nice. Excellent. Cool. Anybody else stuck that would like to do something similar?
Maybe.
Okay.
Let me try it again real quick.
Sure.
Reloading real quick so I get a fresh error.
Let everybody else. Josh Rice, Greg, Ariel, Nathan, you guys get it to work?
Yeah, I'm there.
You there?
Nope, I'm not. I've got still saying no module named environ.
Uh-oh. So did you do the pip install Django-environ that we did, that step?
Yes. It says successfully installed Django environ 0.11.2 on my.
Yeah, you want me to hop in your console?
Sure.
Look? All right, cool. Let's debug yours. What is your username?
Mecu.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Cool. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go in the console, and I'm just going to do pip list. And we'll see what you got. Yeah, okay, cool. You got it in there. All right, let's go to your web tab. And I'm just going to reload the server side just because. All right. Yep, it's saying something went wrong. Error log. set the Django secret key environment variable. Okay. So this is slightly different. So this error that you're running into, what is this telling you? So I did the same traceback stuff, but it looks a little different. The place we ran into it is not the same place. So that's not the error anymore. This is now saying Django key environment variable is not set. So where would we look to try to find where the problem is with that? Where do we set the Django secret key environment variable?
In the .environment file?
Yeah, that's where we set its value.
The .env?
Yeah. Where do we reference it?
Let's see.
So here's our .env where you set it, right? There's Django. Here. I was going to say, this is probably your culprit right here, man. See this little space?
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that's it. Yeah, you want me to take this space out, see if it works?
Sure.
All right, let's do this. All right, I'm going to save this. Reload your code. Let's see. It could be that simple. It could just be the space between. Boom. There we go, man.
So when you were saying earlier that space could mess up, is that because with it being plain text, that space is becoming part of the variable?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because I've done that a bunch of times myself. So like, I still to this day do that kind of thing all the time with environment variables. I mess them up constantly. It's a huge hassle.
So why doesn't that happen with Python?
It's two different things. Honestly, that's the simplest way I could tell you is that it's just two different things. Like Python doesn't care about those spaces, and other programs do. So you got to be careful.
So is Django a program?
It is a framework. So it's a set of tools that are built in to give us useful things. And we'll talk more about it next time on like what is built into it now that we have it kind of set up. And it'll be a little more obvious all the things that it comes with that are built in, like gives us a full set of ways to interact with our databases and stuff like that. Kind of in a graphical user interface. It's like built into all that, so we don't have to build it completely from scratch. And it does things like user logins and the HTTP handling in Python without us having to write the Python itself. Like we can just reference Django as like a tool set. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Greg, Kevin, Ariel, anybody else stuck? Have questions?
No, I'm just following along with the document. I'm not very good at listening and following along with you at the same time, so I'm just doing my own thing. I'm pretty good so far.
Okay. That's fair. Cool. All right. Well, if everybody gets to that point, that's excellent. That's definitely, I think, the most people that nailed it the first time ever. So we should be proud of that. And we can wrap up there. And we're a few minutes early, too. That's also nice. So if no other questions or anything that we want for the group, we can wrap it up. And we'll be back at it tomorrow going, like I just mentioned, Daniel, more into this framework, Django, what it can do for us. And we're going to set up our first page where we're going to replace this Django rocket thing with our own custom homepage. It's not going to look like anything special, but it'll be there. And we'll talk about the routing and how we do that. Cool. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for your time and attention. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Hasta luego, bye-bye.
All right. See ya.